When Aeon Flux first appeared on MTV's Liquid Television in 1991, I was a toddler. Over a decade later, when I first discovered Peter Chung's intense, chaotic, bizarre, feminist, queer cartoon, it blew my mind. I have always had a penchant for the strange and unusual. Aeon Flux is so groundbreaking and subversive, it is still one of the most uniquely strange and unusual pieces of moving artwork I have ever encountered. I have a darkly nuanced and grotesque sense of humor, and I felt so seen by this show. But Aeon Flux isn't just a genre-bending dystopian sci-fi. If you really pay attention, it's also a toxically codependent love story. What really sets Aeon Flux apart is the animation style itself, the overall weirdness, the soundtrack, and the moral ambiguity of the events that transpire. Just to give a bit of background for those who need to stop watching this immediately and buy an Aeon Flux DVD box set instead, the basic premise behind the show is that in the distant future, climate catastrophe has led to mass human extinction. The remaining survivors of the human race are now restricted to two sister cities, Monica and Bregna. Aeon is a spy and an assassin from Monica sent to infiltrate Bregna, which we learn is an extreme political turmoil and a false utopia, outwardly beneficial but secretly totalitarian. Throughout the series, it remains under the control of a fascist, Trevor Goodchild, with whom Aeon has an adversarial but sexually charged relationship. It's complicated. So the animation of Aeon Flux itself is a true work of art. Everything you see has a purpose and in great detail. The animation masters visual storytelling. There are even a few early episodes without any words. The dystopian world itself has a frightening beauty. Frustrated after having worked on the Rugrats, Peter Chung saw this as a chance to literally expand the physical and mental aspects of his artwork, drawing lean and sleek, sexy, futuristic characters and settings. The animation was created without software, just paper, pencil, hand-painted cells, and a 35mm camera. Peter Chung said, "To me, animation is not doing a job, it's a personal commitment to an art form." I think Aeon Flux reminded people that adult animation in America can actually have serious themes and true storytelling. It doesn't have to be all horny fart jokes. Now let's talk about the overall weirdness of the series. It's hard to put into words the places Aeon takes you. From hallucinations to the inside view of people tonguing, to alien monsters, queer sexual tension, fetishism, disturbing songs about eating cold meat, and unthinkable situations. For example, the character Bambara, who says this before cutting off his arm and giving it to a child.
Hi, my name is Bambara. I'm a 36-year-old Virgo and a former killer, whose hobbies include performing recreational autopsies, defecating and drinking rum.
We are transported to a diseased dystopian world where Aeon dies over and over and over again. It's experimental to say the least. You have to wonder how the project ever got greenlit at all. They often didn't understand what I was doing with the show, so I had to be pretty cagey about being too candid about what my real interests were at the time. Moving on, the soundtrack to the series is a bespoke masterpiece. I actually started emailing with Drew Newman, who also did the music for Ah Real Monsters and The Wild Thornberrys, and The Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy. He gave me an entire list of every piece of musical equipment he used, and the objects he used as instruments to create an otherworldly espionage setting. He told me that many of the sounds were found field studio recorded noises that aren't musical instruments. Those were loaded into samplers and made into instruments. Those sounds include banging hardware, metal doors, dragged concrete and metal pipes, struck buckets, crowbars, prepared piano, table lamp strings, and Aeon's signature sound, which was a 1916 Steinway Model M processed through turbosynth and loaded into a sampler. He also said that the advantage of using many found, created sounds for the score was that it allowed me to create a realistic and separate world for Aeon, from the chaos and free will of the Monicans to the tight-assed Euro-techno-fascism of Trevor Goodchild's Bregna. We now come to the part where we talk about the juicy stuff, aka the morally ambiguous nature of the characters, and how the line between good and bad is blurred, so the audience must decide for themselves. There is no distinct protagonist or enemy in the series. Aeon is rogue and doesn't answer to anyone. She makes her own decisions and has to fully deal with the consequences of her actions. She is flawed. She fights for free will and autonomy, but she also has her own selfish desires. Trevor Goodchild is her moral opposite, yet just as noble and selfish as Aeon. They find themselves in many ethical disputes, but they act as a yin-yang. They need each other to exist, but would never admit it. Peter Chung said, "Revolutionaries need an oppressive establishment to thrive, just as governments need hidden enemies to justify structure." Aeon and Trevor treat life as a game, and they are the only players in the twisted codependent fight that never ends. And the sexual tension is extreme. She may never get through to Trevor, but she will also never let him win. 5 minutes is way too short to talk in depth about all the ways Aeon Flux changed the game forever. This year is Aeon's 30th anniversary, and we still don't have enough independent, powerful, confident, self-motivated characters that aren't men, and I'd rather die 1,000 deaths than to keep waiting.